There are moments in life when a question quietly rises within us, a question we may not even know how to name. Why do I see things others seem to miss? Why do certain truths feel obvious to me, yet difficult to explain? Why have I often felt out of place? Not because I wanted to be different, but because my way of understanding the world never quite fit the noise around me. If you have ever carried questions like these, then this message is not random. It is not accidental. It is an invitation to pause, to listen, and to reflect more deeply on something ancient, something sacred, and something profoundly human. Throughout history, long before modern psychology, long before social media and motivational language, the Bible spoke of wisdom as a gift. Not a degree, not a title, not something measured by applause or recognition, but a quiet, steady intelligence that flows from God and shapes the way a person sees, discerns, and lives. In the letter of James, we find a simple yet powerful invitation. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach. This single sentence has echoed through centuries of spiritual reflection. It does not promise instant success. It does not guarantee popularity. Instead, it points to something far more enduring. Divine wisdom that guides a person from within, often unnoticed by the world, yet deeply transformative. In this series, we will explore what this wisdom truly means. We will examine why those who carry it often feel misunderstood, why solitude so often accompanies spiritual insight, and why discernment, timing, and humility matter just as much as clarity itself. This is not a message about superiority. It is not about being above others. It is about responsibility, about understanding that seeing deeply comes with a calling to live wisely, patiently, and compassionately. So take a breath, set aside distraction, and allow yourself to journey slowly through these reflections. Because wisdom, as Scripture reminds us, does not shout. It waits to be received. When you are ready, we begin. Part 1. Wisdom that does not announce itself. One of the most misunderstood ideas in both modern culture and spiritual conversation is the nature of wisdom itself. We often confuse wisdom with intelligence and intelligence with information. Yet Scripture draws a clear and deliberate distinction between knowing many things and understanding deeply. Biblical wisdom does not announce itself loudly. It does not demand attention. It does not seek validation. In fact, true wisdom often moves in the opposite direction of recognition. It settles quietly within a person, shaping perception long before it ever shapes speech. In the ancient world, wisdom was understood not as raw intellect, but as the ability to live rightly. The Hebrew concept of wisdom pointed to skill in living, discernment in decision-making, and the capacity to see consequences before they unfold. It was practical, ethical, and deeply spiritual. This helps us understand why many people who carry this kind of wisdom sense things early. They notice patterns. They feel tension beneath polite words. They recognize when something is off, even if they cannot immediately explain why. This is not arrogance. It is awareness. The letter of James addresses believers who are facing uncertainty, pressure, and hardship. When James speaks about wisdom, he's not talking about abstract philosophy. He's speaking about the kind of clarity that helps a person navigate trials without losing their moral compass. Wisdom, in this sense, is not information stored in the mind, but orientation rooted in faith. This kind of wisdom often creates distance, not because it seeks separation, but because it operates at a different rhythm. While the world rushes toward quick answers, wise discernment pauses. While others react emotionally, wisdom observes. While noise increases, wisdom grows quieter. That quietness can be misinterpreted. People may assume silence means uncertainty. They may assume restraint means fear. Yet in spiritual tradition, restraint is often the mark of maturity. Wisdom does not speak simply because it can. It speaks because it must. Many who carry this gift remember moments from early life when they sensed things that others dismissed. Perhaps they questioned decisions that everyone else accepted. Perhaps they felt uneasy in situations that appeared safe on the surface. These experiences can feel isolating, especially when there is no language yet to explain them. But the Bible consistently affirms that wisdom is not proven by applause. It is proven by fruit. Its value becomes visible over time, not in the moment of expression, but in the outcomes it quietly shapes. This is why Scripture invites believers to ask God for wisdom rather than chase recognition. Wisdom given by God is not designed to elevate ego. It is designed to steady the soul. It anchors a person when emotions rise, opinions shift, and certainty feels rare. Understanding this reframes the experience of being overlooked or misunderstood. It reminds us that wisdom was never meant to compete with noise. It was meant to endure beyond it. And this leads us to a difficult truth that many discover slowly. The more clearly a person sees, the more carefully they must learn to carry what they see. That responsibility is where the journey truly begins. Part 2. Why insight often creates distance. One of the most difficult experiences for those who carry deep insight is the sense of distance it creates in relationships. This distance is not always physical. More often, it is emotional or perceptual. It is the quiet realization that you are not seeing the same world in the same way as those around you. Scripture never suggests that wisdom will automatically make life easier. In fact, throughout biblical history, those who saw clearly were often misunderstood. Joseph saw dreams that others dismissed. Jeremiah spoke truths that were rejected. Even Jesus himself was frequently misunderstood, not because his message lacked clarity, but because it challenged assumptions people were not ready to release. Insight disrupts comfort. It questions narratives that feel safe. And when people feel their internal structure threatened, they often respond defensively. This is not malice, it is human nature. The video speaks about others feeling uncomfortable or even fearful when confronted with clarity. From a theological perspective, this can be understood through the concept of conviction. When wisdom reveals what has been ignored, avoided, or rationalized, it invites self-examination. Not everyone welcomes that invitation. This is why wise individuals are often labeled as too intense, too serious, or too different. Their presence alone can surface questions others would rather not ask. And when words are added to that presence, the reaction can intensify. Yet it is important to approach this carefully. The Bible does not teach that disagreement or rejection automatically validates a person's insight. Wisdom must always remain tethered to humility. Discernment that becomes self-righteous ceases to be wisdom and becomes pride. Distance, then, is not proof of superiority. It is often a byproduct of perspective. Seeing further means standing slightly apart. Not above, not beneath, just apart. Many people respond to this distance by shrinking. They silence themselves prematurely. They begin to doubt their perception. They learn to keep insight hidden, not out of wisdom, but out of fear of rejection. Over time, this can erode confidence and clarity. Scripture offers a different approach. It invites patience rather than withdrawal, trust rather than performance. Wisdom is not lost when it is not immediately received. It matures. The biblical writers understood timing. Proverbs repeatedly emphasizes that a word spoken at the right moment has power. This suggests that wisdom is not only about what is seen, but about when it is revealed. Distance can serve a purpose. It creates space for discernment to deepen. It allows insight to be refined before it is shared. And it teaches the wise person to listen as much as they speak. In this way, Distance becomes a teacher rather than a punishment. It trains the soul to rely not on external affirmation, but on inner alignment with God. And alignment, once established, becomes the foundation for responsibility. Because insight, when carried well, is never meant to isolate permanently. It is meant to prepare. In the next part, we will explore why solitude is not an accident in the life of the wise, but a necessary season of formation. Part 3. The purpose of solitude. In spiritual formation, solitude is one of the most misunderstood experiences in the spiritual life. In a culture that equates connection with value and visibility with success, being alone can feel like failure. Yet throughout biblical history, solitude appears not as a punishment, but as a deliberate space of preparation. Many of the most formative moments in Scripture occur away from crowds. Moses encounters God in the wilderness. Elijah hears God not in the wind or fire, but in a quiet whisper. Jesus repeatedly withdraws to solitary places to pray, even when his public ministry is at its peak. These moments of withdrawal are not escapes. They are alignments. Solitude strips away distraction. It removes the constant feedback of approval and rejection, and in doing so, it exposes what remains when no one is watching. This is why solitude can feel uncomfortable. It confronts a person with their own thoughts, fears, and unresolved questions. For those with deep insight, solitude often arrives uninvited. Relationships thin, conversations feel shallow. There is a growing awareness that not every space can hold what you carry. This can create a sense of isolation, even in the presence of others. But Scripture frames this season differently. Solitude is where discernment sharpens. Without the pressure to perform or explain, wisdom deepens. Patterns become clearer. Motives are examined. The difference between intuition and assumption begins to emerge. This is crucial because insight without refinement can be dangerous. Seeing clearly does not automatically mean seeing correctly. Solitude allows time for prayer, reflection, and correction. It creates room for God to shape not just what a person perceives, but how they respond to it. The video describes solitude as a season rather than a destination. This distinction matters. Biblical solitude is temporary and purposeful. It prepares a person for return, not retreat. Even Jesus returns from the wilderness. Even prophets re-enter community. In spiritual formation, solitude functions like a forge. Heat and pressure refine substance. What is unnecessary is burned away. What remains becomes stronger. This process is rarely comfortable, but it is deeply transformative. It is also in solitude that humility is tested. Without an audience, insight must stand on its own. There is no applause to chase, no opposition to react against. Only alignment remains. And alignment reveals whether wisdom is rooted in ego or in obedience. This is why solitude often precedes influence. Not because influence is the goal, but because wisdom must be anchored before it is shared. A person who has not learned to be alone with God will struggle to stand steadily before others. Understanding solitude in this way transforms how it is experienced. It becomes less about what is missing and more about what is being formed. Less about isolation and more about preparation. And when the season shifts, when connection returns, something has changed. The wise person speaks less impulsively. They listen more carefully. They are no longer driven by the need to be understood. This prepares the ground for the next essential element of wisdom, discernment in timing and expression. That is where we turn next. Part 4. Discernment, timing, and the weight of words. One of the clearest signs of mature wisdom is not how much a person knows, but how carefully they choose to speak. Scripture consistently places great emphasis on the power of words, not only in their content, but in their timing. Wisdom is never rushed. It waits for alignment. The Bible describes words as having the power to build or to wound, to bring life or to cause harm. This is why discernment becomes inseparable from wisdom. Insight without discernment can overwhelm, confuse, or even divide. But insight guided by timing becomes transformative. The video uses the image of a seed hidden beneath the soil. This metaphor carries deep biblical resonance. Growth is not visible at first. If the seed is unearthed too early, its process is disrupted. In the same way, understanding often requires concealment before revelation. Not every truth is meant to be spoken immediately. Not every realization requires an audience. This does not diminish the value of insight. It protects it. Scripture affirms that there is a time to speak and a time to remain silent. Silence, when guided by wisdom, is not fear. It is stewardship. Many people confuse restraint with suppression. They assume that if something is not expressed, it is being denied. Yet wisdom recognizes that unprepared listeners can misunderstand even the clearest truth. Timing determines whether words are received as guidance or as threat. This is especially important for those whose insight challenges assumptions. When truth confronts comfort, it can trigger defensiveness. Discernment helps identify when a heart is open and when it is closed. Speaking into a closed heart often leads to resistance rather than reflection. Jesus himself modeled this restraint. He did not answer every question directly. He often spoke in parables, allowing listeners to engage at their own level of readiness. At times, he remained silent altogether. This was not avoidance, it was wisdom. Discernment also involves self-awareness. It requires recognizing when emotion is influencing expression. Even true insight, when delivered from frustration or impatience, can lose its effectiveness. Wisdom waits until clarity is joined with calm. This waiting can feel costly. There is a tension between seeing clearly and remaining quiet. Yet this tension refines character. It teaches patience, it cultivates humility, and it anchors wisdom in purpose rather than impulse. Over time, those who practice discernment discover something important. When the moment is right, words carry weight. They land differently. They do not need volume or repetition. Their clarity is enough. This is the paradox of wisdom. The more carefully it is guarded, the more powerfully it is expressed when released. But even with discernment, misunderstanding does not disappear entirely. There will still be moments when insight is misread or dismissed. This leads us to another essential aspect of carrying wisdom well. Learning where validation truly comes from. That is the focus of the next part. Part 5. Validation, humility, and the source of confidence. One of the quiet struggles faced by those who carry deep insight is the question of validation. When understanding is not immediately affirmed, when wisdom is not recognized, it is natural to wonder whether it truly holds value. Over time, this tension can erode confidence or, in some cases, harden into pride. Scripture offers a different foundation for confidence, one that does not depend on agreement or applause. It consistently redirects the heart away from external validation and toward alignment with God. Wisdom, in the biblical sense, is never self-authorizing. Its authority comes from its source. This is why humility is inseparable from true discernment. Humility does not mean minimizing insight or pretending not to see what is clear. It means recognizing that wisdom is received, not owned. It is stewarded, not possessed. When validation is sought primarily from others, wisdom becomes fragile. Approval can inflate it. Rejection can crush it. But when validation is rooted in God, insight remains steady regardless of response. This steadiness allows a person to remain open rather than defensive, grounded rather than reactive. The video emphasizes that misunderstanding does not negate calling. Historically, this aligns with the experience of many biblical figures. Their faithfulness was not measured by popularity, but by obedience. They were often affirmed long after their words were first spoken. At the same time, humility guards against the temptation to interpret every disagreement as blindness in others. Wisdom invites self-examination as much as it offers perspective. It remains teachable, it listens, it allows correction. This balance is delicate. Confidence without humility becomes arrogance. Humility without confidence becomes silence rooted in fear. Biblical wisdom holds both together. It allows clarity without superiority and conviction without contempt. Another aspect of validation involves identity. When insight becomes the primary source of identity, it can isolate. Scripture places identity not in giftedness, but in relationship with God. Wisdom flows from that relationship, not the other way around. This reframing is liberating. It means a person does not need to prove their insight to justify their worth. They are already known, already seen, already guided. Such grounding protects the heart from bitterness. It prevents wisdom from becoming sharp-edged or cynical. Instead, it keeps insight oriented towards service rather than self-definition. And service is where wisdom ultimately finds its expression, not as control, not as dominance, but as guidance offered gently, patiently, and at the right moment. Part 6. Wisdom as service, not separation. When wisdom is fully formed, it begins to reveal its true purpose. It is not meant to separate a person permanently from others, nor to elevate one above the rest. Biblical wisdom always moves towards service. It flows outward, not inward. In Scripture, wisdom is never an end in itself. It exists to bring clarity where there is confusion, peace where there is turmoil, and direction where there is uncertainty. This is why the most influential expressions of wisdom are often quiet. They do not dominate conversations, they steady them. Those who carry deep insight may be tempted to withdraw indefinitely, especially after seasons of misunderstanding. But wisdom that remains isolated too long risks becoming inward-focused. The biblical pattern is different. Solitude prepares, but service fulfills. Service does not require platforms or recognition. Often it appears in ordinary moments, a timely word, a calm presence, a thoughtful pause before reaction. Wisdom serves by stabilizing environments rather than controlling them. This is why Scripture repeatedly associates wisdom with gentleness. James later writes that wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruit. This description reframes genius entirely. True wisdom is not sharp-edged. It is not intimidating. It is trustworthy. When insight is aligned with service, it loses the need to prove itself. There is no urgency to convince, no pressure to persuade. Wisdom trusts that truth carries its own weight when offered in love and patience. This does not mean wisdom avoids difficult conversations. It means those conversations are approached with care. The goal is not to win arguments, but to illuminate paths forward. Wisdom serves the well-being of others, even when it costs comfort. This posture transforms how insight is received. People may not immediately agree, but they sense intention. They feel respected rather than challenged. Over time, trust grows. Service also guards against isolation. It reconnects wisdom to community, not as conformity, but as contribution. The wise person does not dissolve into the crowd, nor stand apart from it. They stand within it, offering perspective without force. In this way, wisdom becomes a stabilizing presence rather than a dividing one. It brings coherence to complexity. It helps others see more clearly without feeling diminished. This is the quiet power the video gestures toward. Not brilliance that intimidates, but clarity that heals, not insight that separates, but understanding that prepares the way for growth. And when wisdom reaches this stage, something shifts. It is no longer carried as a burden. It is carried as a responsibility fulfilled with grace. This leads naturally to the final reflection: how to hold this calling without pressure, and how to walk forward with trust rather than striving. That is where we conclude. Part 7. Walking forward with trust and alignment. As we move toward the conclusion, it is essential to consider the path forward for anyone carrying deep insight or wisdom. Life, with all its complexity and unpredictability, often tests the endurance of those who see clearly. Yet the scriptures provide guidance, not as a map of ease, but as a framework for trust, alignment, and faithful living. First, recognize that your path is not measured by external validation. The world may not immediately recognize clarity or insight, and that is expected. What matters is alignment with God's purpose, the careful stewardship of what has been entrusted to you, and the steady cultivation of discernment. Trust, in this context, is both an internal and external posture. Internally, it involves confidence in the gift itself. Externally, it requires patience in the timing of revelation. Just as a tree grows in silence before it bears fruit, insight matures in the quiet moments before it becomes actionable in the world. Alignment is equally critical. Wisdom is most powerful when it is integrated with moral and spiritual integrity. Knowledge alone can be dangerous. Clarity untempered by humility can alienate. Discernment ensures that insight is shared responsibly, gently, and in ways that bring life rather than confusion. Prayer and reflection remain central to this process. By returning repeatedly to the source of wisdom, to God, the individual grounds insight in a foundation that does not waver with approval or criticism. The video emphasizes this point, encouraging time spent in stillness and prayer, asking not just for knowledge, but for guidance in how to live and act upon it. A second, often overlooked aspect of walking forward is resilience. Insight, especially when unrecognized, can feel isolating. It can tempt the individual to shrink or to silence their own perception. Yet Scripture frames endurance as a spiritual discipline. Those who remain faithful to their calling, even in the absence of recognition, cultivate patience, persistence, and the capacity to respond rather than react. Finally, the purpose of insight is ultimately relational. Wisdom is meant to illuminate paths, guide decisions, and support others in understanding. When insight is applied as service, in work, in relationships, in leadership, in mentorship, it fulfills its intended role. This transforms solitude and misunderstanding from burdens into necessary stages of preparation for greater influence. The journey of those described as chosen or gifted is not a linear ascent. It is a dynamic process of observation, refinement, discernment, and service. Misunderstanding, isolation, and delay are not signs of failure, but markers of the process. They indicate that the individual is being equipped, often in ways invisible to those around them. Walking forward, therefore, is less about seeking recognition and more about maintaining integrity. It is about cultivating clarity without compulsion, speaking with impact rather than volume, and trusting that the timing of expression is as critical as the content itself. Alignment with purpose, patience, and resilience transform wisdom into a steady light, one that illuminates not just the path of the individual, but also the paths of those who are ready to receive it. In this light, being chosen is less a statement of superiority and more a call to responsibility. It is an invitation to navigate life with intentionality, guided by discernment, sustained by humility, and anchored in trust. In the concluding section, we will summarize the key insights and reflect on how this understanding of wisdom can inspire practical, daily living. Conclusion: embracing wisdom as a guiding light. As we come to the close of this reflection, it becomes clear that wisdom, insight, and discernment are gifts that carry both privilege and responsibility. They are not merely personal traits, nor are they accolades to be displayed. Rather, they are instruments for alignment with God, with purpose, and with the rhythms of life that require patience, humility, and care. Throughout history, the figures we revere in Scripture were often misunderstood, dismissed, or even opposed in the earliest stages of their calling. Joseph's dreams unsettled his brothers. Jeremiah's prophecies disturbed entire communities. Jesus' teachings challenged the status quo of his time. Their experiences reflect a timeless truth. Clarity and insight frequently disrupt comfort. Yet these disruptions were never ends in themselves. They were preparatory, shaping character, refining discernment, and cultivating resilience. For those who carry a deep sense of purpose today, these lessons remain profoundly relevant. Solitude is not punishment, but refinement. Silence is not weakness, but stewardship. Misunderstanding is not rejection, but a mirror reflecting the readiness of those around us to perceive truth. And discernment, the careful timing of words, the measured exercise of insight, transforms knowledge into a guiding force, not a weapon. The call then is to walk forward with trust. Trust that the wisdom within you is part of a larger design. Trust that patience strengthens impact. Trust that alignment with purpose will guide every step. Validation will not always come from others, and that is not failure. True affirmation arises from fidelity to the path, from integration of insight with humility, and from the gentle, persistent service to the world that Scripture consistently honors. Ultimately, wisdom is a light. It may shine quietly, but it endures. It illuminates paths not only for the individual, but for all who are ready to walk beside them. It transforms ordinary moments into opportunities for clarity, understanding, and healing. And it teaches that greatness does not reside in being recognized, but in faithfully carrying the gifts entrusted to you. So, as you reflect on this journey, embrace the quiet power of your insight. Stand patiently in the rhythms of preparation. Speak with discernment, act with integrity, and trust the unfolding of purpose beyond immediate comprehension. Your journey is not about seeking applause, but about fulfilling the role you are uniquely equipped to carry. In a world often impatient with depth and clarity, remember this: wisdom waits, refines, and illuminates. It is steady, it is enduring, and it is yours to steward. Carry it with humility, courage, and trust, and it will guide both your path and the lives of those whose hearts are open to its light. This is the journey of the chosen, not of superiority, but of faithful responsibility. Not of loud recognition, but of quiet, transformative service. And in walking it well, you honor both the gift and the source from which it comes.